Welcome to the Beat Sessions, your place for all things music. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Let's talk about this debut record from Wisp, entitled If Not Winter. She released that on August 1st. Just 18 years old when she first burst onto the scene, it's been a pretty wild couple of years for the artist whose real name is Natalie Liu, but who now operates under a moniker that I think wholly captures the essence of her voice, which I think is stellar. She first gained recognition with her debut single, Your Face, which was released back in April of 2023, and pretty much became an overnight success with the help of TikTok. And then almost a year to the day later, she released her first extended play entitled Pandora, which is when I first discovered her because my old ass doesn't use TikTok. I want to lead this thing off by saying, to a degree, I feel like there's a fair stigma attached to TikTok success, so to speak. The lack of legitimacy that I feel goes along with a lot of people who have found that success. I think for those of us who don't use it, it kind of feels like this new generation's version of American Idol in many ways. A somewhat contrived and overly commercial means for digging up talent. And then for those who do use it, I think there's the fleeting nature of what these artists bring to the table on these platforms. It's the classic 15 minutes of fame being dumbed down to about 15 seconds. And so with that said, while I'm not a fan of TikTok or American Idol for that matter, I will say that to a degree, I admire that both platforms represent populism in action, for better or for worse. Let the people decide. I find the idea of voters, or now on platforms, hits that trigger an algorithm, find that better in determining the outcome of an artist's success versus the classic tradition of a bunch of suits sitting around a table arbitrarily deciding the fate of artists and controlling what gets put out en masse to the rest of us. And I think Wisp is an artist that is worthy of the hype and the praise that she has received, with a number of people considering her the leader of the current shoegaze revival. And I love this. It's a genre that I adore, just particularly the hypnotic and ethereal nature of the sounds that characterize it. But I would also argue that Wisp is doing great things to make a sound that is all her own, incorporating shoegaze, but also other familiar elements that might have a lot of listeners asking in a good way, who does this remind me of? Unfortunately, the elitists at Pitchfork want to call it derivative, but I feel like it's such a moot point these days, especially with her openly citing bands like Cocteau Twins and Beach House as influences. I feel like these bands, though, are just a part of what she's doing. For me, she sounds like equal parts Mazzy Star, My Bloody Valentine, and Deftones, bringing all of these sounds together. I don't think it's derivative. I think it's taking inspiration from a lot of great bands that have come before you. And I love the people that have mentioned Deftones with regards to the heavy guitars, because I couldn't agree with it more. And I also think maybe a little sprinkle of like Billy Howardell from A Perfect Circle, just this great alternative metal sound. If Not Winter is a solid debut that represents another significant step for an artist that is still quite new to it all. And it helps that she has a stellar group of collaborators around her, notably Ajay Bhattacharya, Alden Gardner-Robinson, Gabriel Greenland, and Max Epstein. This is a crew that really helps to bring these unique compositions to life with outstanding production, in my opinion. I think it finds great balance between the dense textures of shoegaze and the somewhat cleaner sounds that are showcased by certain bands that over the decades have been lumped into this loose idea of dream pop, so to speak. It's so open-ended. I feel like you can take that term as far back as the Beach Boys if you wanted to. And I appreciate that her vocals aren't completely incomprehensible. There's moments where she takes this route, but unlike most bands in this arena, I think that this slight difference, it really captures the aesthetic and the feelings of love that unfold on this record. This is an album that takes its title from a book by the Canadian classicist and poet Anne Carson, which contains a translation of the surviving works of the archaic Greek poet Sappho. The title, If Not Winter, comes from Anne's translation of Sappho's Fragment 22. And Sappho is a poet who is probably most well known for her lyrical poetry, written to be sung while accompanied by music, and with a primary focus on love. And so, what her and Wisp both have in common is that I think both of them long for the ability to be vulnerable, to express their love, but they both find themselves caught in a state of apprehension when they attempt to do this. And I also think the vocal production, but the music as well, works brilliantly to capture the narrative frustration here, with tracks that feature a back and forth between moments of dream pop that represent that calm and then shift dramatically into seismic and heavy guitar segments that represent that feeling of just like wanting to like get all that frustration out there. There's this wonderful murky and dense texture throughout the record that's typical of dream pop and more notably shoegaze, but plenty of moments where the riffs work their way to the foreground to demonstrate the power of feelings not easily expressed. I think the drums are spectacular on this record as well, subdued when appropriate, but also explosive and propulsive when the time comes to complement all those big guitars. And then there's also plenty of stellar bass work and icy synths that convey a mood of isolation and heartbreak that I really gives these tracks this complete feel. I will say that song structure does become a little predictable, particularly with the numerous long outros on many of these tracks that don't really have long runtimes. So it kind of feels like wasted space to a tiny degree. And then there's also the back and forth between the light and heavy elements that really just becomes kind of monotonous. It's not detrimental, but it does have me curious to see what she brings in the next go around in the future. And I hope she's a little more adventurous. And I think the same could be said about her vocals. I love the hushed, delicate nature of her voice, but given what she's doing sonically, it would be great to see her vocals match the power of some of those big guitars on projects down the road. This record kicks off with your first track, Sword, opens with a fade in on synths that capture the essence of an icy winter landscape. There's this really interesting wiry slide element that begins to play around as the breezy strum of an acoustic guitar fades in. And then that acoustic texture becomes more prominent, along with a soft touch of bass and drums, and then vocals that showcase right off the bat why she chose the name Wisp, especially if this is your first time listening to her. The chorus hits hard and rocks out. It's got this stellar shift in energy, and the track mellows for a brief moment into the second verse that features a bit more instrumentation before an abrupt shift sees the music drop, except for the intense swelling of guitar that is going to take us into the chorus to finish this thing out. You get a big crash of drums the crashing drums are just a big highlight for me on this one, and I love that it's also an indication of, something that you're going to get a lot of on this record as well. Your second track is entitled Breathe Onto Me. Got these brief drums that usher in a hard rockin' intro with excellent tonal guitar effects. I love the soft droning in the backdrop of one guitar. It has this like gentle screeching tone and the heavy in-your-face action of the lead rhythm that works over the top of that. The music mellows a bit as the track moves into the first verse, but remains full of texture and still somewhat heavy. The chorus goes even bigger with that great lead guitar, which takes the listener right into the next verse. There's going to be another cycle of this structure with an extended play on the next chorus that leads into a coda of formless synth action, and it's got obscured spoken word vocals as well. It's going to happen from time to time on this record. Your third track is entitled Save Me Now. Opens with vocals and electric rhythm guitar. You got this soft electronic drum element that works into the mix with a bit of bass as this intro unfolds. Prominent rhythm takes over as the song works through the first verse, and then the chorus goes hard with icy synth elements that drone in the backdrop and bright soaring vocals that taper off towards the finish, with heavy instrumentation leading into the next verse. And then it starts with a brief muted moment before finding its legs and moves into the chorus with nothing but this like lo-fi guitar. I really like the production here on that instrument. There's a couple of brief, formless, and almost quiet moments that bookend a heavy coda to finish this track, and it's going to lead right into your next song, your fourth track, After Dark. This one starts with a light electric riff that has this almost kind of like breezy island vibe to it. It's not long before it's swallowed up by a swell of droning synths and feedback, and then some other light percussion. This build is brief, finishing with the opening line, "Could I Fall Down?" And that is going to usher in the first verse that features prominent electric rhythm guitar, mellow percussion, and a soft droning element that is still, it's kind of like somewhat piercing. It's very interesting, the effect that synth element has. The opening line takes us into a chorus that finds the song's texture and momentum swelling around the guitar, but this one remains restrained. It's an interesting choice, and I like it. It doesn't go as heavy as the first three tracks do. There's another big instrumental coda that takes us out with these kind of chimey synths and searing guitar. And this one transitions right into your fifth track, Guide Light. This one is a highlight for me. I really dig this song. You get an arpeggiated electric riff that leads this one out with spaced out drum crashes and additional electric guitar play that builds in. Flickering synth elements usher in that signature shoegaze haze and slightly distorted vocals to open the first verse. And then after a few lines, this thing is going to go heavy with the guitars and an echoey synth that's searing and spooky as well. It's really cool. I love this bit of instrumentation. The track mellows as the vocals return, but there's certainly much more texture than it opened with. And then it's not long before it goes heavy once more, this with a great vocal hook and arpeggiated electric guitar that all drifts out for just a second before coming back heavy with that great synth. And I just love the way that the tempo on this one, it slows out of nowhere. Really like a nice shoegazy moment here, really enhancing the sludginess of the track. It's just this great slowdown that is brilliant. The coda is big with vocals and electric rhythm guitar, but the feedback begins to pick up and leads into your sixth track entitled Latvia, which is kind of like an interlude. You get the feedback that mellows as a formless atmosphere of birds chirping and bells chiming takes hold of the listener. The bells are slowly overcome by piano that's quite lovely, but it's also then soon overtaken by this ominous synth that takes the track with like bright beginnings into a really dark place to finish it out. And then leading into your title track, your seventh song, If Not Winter. This one opens with obscured electric slide guitar in the backdrop and acoustic rhythm that's production brings it to the foreground. Wisp's vocals hit to open the verse, with the track remaining minimal and somewhat formless with the absence of percussion. And then there's this searing electric guitar and then gentle rhythm that hit on the hook, It Burns Me, to take us into the chorus, which finishes by drifting back into this formless landscape. The second verse is marked with these bubbly synths that possess almost kind of like a sci-fi quality and other synth textures that swell and lead into the chorus. The coda returns the track to this minimalism with melancholy vocal elements and piano as well to close it out. Your eighth track is entitled Mesmerized. This one ups the energy coming off the title track with scorching reverb, and this creates this formless kind of like brooding atmosphere. The drums kick in to take this one into hard rockin' territory, with the track moving into the first verse while maintaining this feel. The pre-chorus is marked with some solid heavy bass play that I really enjoyed, and then shifting into the chorus with bright vocal melodies that play with the song's title as a hook on this one. This is a song that is really just unrelenting. I like this move. And it shifts through another round of verse and chorus before finishing up with a guitar solo that ups the scorching factor on this thing. Just real high energy. And I appreciate the difference in song structure as well on that one. Serpentine kicks off with a gentle acoustic rhythm guitar, piano, and soft droning textures. This is your ninth track. Electronic percussion follows shortly after before ceding way to live, galloping drums that kickstart the verse. Chorus is going to hit with heavier instrumentation and airy vocals, with the piano working through the back end and with the refrain, "You always knew." The track transitions seamlessly into a brief second verse before returning to the chorus that fades into a formless coda, a feedback, synths, and bits of guitar and piano, with also some hushed spoken word vocals to complement. And it's going to take us into our 10th track, which is entitled "Get Back to Me." This one is going to open with an ambient, reverb-driven electric riff that really, this is one that really kind of reminded me a lot of what Billy Howerdel does for A Perfect Circle. Vocals fuse in shortly after a few more bars of this, and the build continues with a second guitar and a bit of bass as well. Your background textures gently swell to give the track some momentum, and then with the drums finally hitting around the halfway mark of this song to give it some structure, but maintaining restraint initially. And then shortly after a few more bars, this song finally explodes, but it's still delicate and dreamy, and I really enjoyed the kind of change in structure on this one. There isn't the dark, brooding nature of many of these tracks, but the guitars still hit really hard, and it's another track that is a highlight for me. And your penultimate track, your 11th song, is entitled "Black Swan." Yet brief white noise that ushers in a cluttered tapestry of cold synths before heavy guitars take this thing by the throat. I think it's a great penultimate track, highlighting everything that she's doing very well on this record, particularly the balance of ethereal and escapist textures grounded by those visceral guitar riffs. I dig that it stays heavy into the verse, and I was admittedly expecting it to mellow a bit more, and I appreciate this move. Vocals shift into hushed, obscured spoken word just after about the 2-minute mark, with the heavy guitars backing off. The rhythm and arpeggiated electric guitar that carry the vocals drop out soon afterward, and then leaving only her spoken word and waves of synths that are working around that. And then those synths swell for a brief period, reintroducing the full instrumentation with her delicate vocals for a big finish that drifts into this chaotic but gentle coda without form, transitioning right into your final track, which is entitled "All I Need." This one is another, I don't want to call it an interlude, but it's a hot number. Not a very long track, just under 2 minutes. Opens with acoustic guitar and vocals that carry through for a brief but perfect and peaceful finish to a pretty intense experience. I love the arpeggiated electric riff that works in about halfway through, and it's the instrumentation that ultimately takes us out to finish this record. An effort that is far from perfect, but also you have someone, despite being around experienced people, taking the lead and who is still learning, who is still not experienced when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And overall, I think she does a pretty fine job of creating a record that has great cohesion. I will say that this thing from start to finish really does flow with great continuity. It's definitely a strength that, it's something that I don't necessarily see artists on their first go around do very well. It's not like it's unheard of, but it really is great to see her really hone in on that skill and that ability. And again, as I mentioned, I think that to a degree, more so in the first half of the record, there's kind of the predictability with the compositions. I think towards the back end, you get songs that are a little more adventurous, that keep you on the edge of your seat, that aren't quite as predictable. And hopefully down the road, she works on the strength of those compositions and maybe draws some of these tracks out. I feel some of them are a little hot, and especially when you factor in those long outros that are there. I mean, some of these tracks are right around the 3-minute mark, and some of those outros are maybe 20, 30 seconds. So, you're talking about ultimately a 2.5-minute track that, who knows, it could be fleshed out, or maybe you chip away at some of that. Not that it's necessary. The runtime on this thing is great, 38 minutes, 13 seconds. And with 12 songs, I think that's pretty impressive. But, it's a great experience, and there's a lot of good stuff here that shows a lot of potential for a promising artist down the road. I'm going to give this record a 7.6 out of 10, and I really hope you enjoy listening to this record. I hope you find this review helpful as well. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, Do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2025, and stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We will see you next time on the Beat Sessions.